Hello and welcome to episode 17 as I build my way through the battle games in Middle-earth magazines. As I said at the end of the previous video, these are going to be coming out slightly less regularly, once a month rather than every fortnight, so that I get a bit more time to enjoy the build and really excel at my expanded build. That didn't make much sense, but I know what I meant. Anyway, this week the subject is campsites, campfires, tents, that kind of thing, and it's a really interesting looking magazine actually, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in, making the exact builds as they are described in the tutorials. And also I have come up with an idea, and I'm pleased about this one, for the advanced or slightly more special build which I'll be doing alongside. Now, last video I started to post some teaser pictures on Instagram for the build I did, which was Welling Hall, obviously, Treebeard's house, and I had a few people guessing, and I had one particular person who managed to guess the answer correctly. So I'm going to do the same thing this time as well, and at the end of this video I will announce who managed to guess, if anyone did, through the build. But you're not going to see this until after that anyway, so I can tell you what it is. My idea for the advanced build is to make the campsite where Frodo and his friends and Aragorn pitch up and rest, and then Aragorn buggers off, and then the Witch King comes and stabs Frodo. Yes, I'm going to make that campsite. It's going to be quite nice and small. It's not going to be too huge of a deal, but it is going to be a nice little display piece, and it will maybe even be quite playable as well with how I'm going to design it. Now, I've not yet decided if I'm going to do that as within the films or in the books. Probably the books, to be honest. Those are the ones I like most. But anyway, we shall see, and you shall find out as you watch the rest of this video. Now, I've rambled on in this introduction long enough, so let's go and have a look at the magazine and get started. Here we are, Wilderness Campsite. The wilds of Middle-earth are vast and filled with danger. Travellers need to be prepared for harsh weather and prowling orcs. Having a good campsite is essential for survival in such an unforgiving wilderness. So, this is going to be quite a lot of fun. There are actually several builds. There's several different items that you can make. So first of all, there's the base. Then the campsite equipment, so making a fire, making bedrolls, and then finally making a tent, and that's it. So there's a few things to do, and it looks quite a lot of fun. The suggested materials is hardboard, thick card and foam card. Now, I don't have any hardboard. It is something that you just cannot get here, so I'll be using an alternative to that. A junior hacksaw and a craft knife. Yep, sandpaper, PVA glue, super glue and paintbrush, brown, yellow and white acrylic paints, flock, and paper towels, stones, dry twigs or sticks, and string. It also mentions about textured paint. Textured paint is normal paint with sand mixed in. Now, this is something which I don't do. I do the paint down and then spread the sand over the top and then put paint over the top of that. It's just how I prefer to do it, but it has the same outcome. So I'll read their description because you may decide that you would rather do it their way. Textured paint is normal paint with sand mixed in. The sand gives the paint a grainy texture that is ideal for modelling purposes. There are generally two types of textured paint, fine and rough. Fine textured paint is used the most during modelling projects, and it can come in a variety of colours. Black is very useful as it does not need to be undercoated afterwards. It is available in most DIY stores, and a typical 5-litre pot will last a very long time. Always follow the manufacturer's safety instructions on the tin. Many types of texture paint need to be used in well-ventilated areas. Now, you can make it by mixing it together, so buy normal house paints, chuck a load of sand in and mix it up and what have you. I would recommend using the terrain paint that you'll find a link to the description of how to make that in the description below, and then sifted sand. I would not bother making textured paint. Anyway, let's move on. I will get my materials together for part one, making the base, and we can get started. So, step one, the hardboard base. Now, mine isn't going to be hardboard, as I've said. I've got this very thick cardboard. It's very solid, double layer, which I'm going to use instead. I did have a look at MDF, decided against it. It's going to be too much of a pain to cut. I just can't be bothered, and this is going to be fine. So I will be following the instructions for the rest of it, but for this, yeah, I just want it to be with materials I have to hand. So it says, draw a rough circle onto a piece of hardboard or cardboard. Make the circle about 25 centimetres. I've just grabbed my ruler so I can do that. About 25 centimetres in diameter. Cut this circle out with a junior hacksaw. Take it slow and be careful or you may snap the sword's blade. Once you have your base, sand the sides to get rid of all the rough edges. And it then also suggests potentially the use of a power tool. Now, because I'm going to be doing this on cardboard, I don't need to worry about that. I am actually going to be able to do it on this bottom bit, which is good. So what I'm going to do is very simply mark 25 centimetres here, and then 25 centimetres here, and then draw a bit of a circle around that. Not a perfect circle, they were a good band, that's aging me maybe. Yeah, not a perfect circle and not worrying too much about it actually meeting exactly on those marks, but they're just going to give me a good kind of dimension to go for. So now I've done that, I'm going to cut it out, and to do this I'm going to use my trusty Stanley knife, which I really like. I know that you can get Stanley knives that don't have the extending blades. This is probably a tool I use more than most other tools, other than clamps. I like clamps. So I'm going to cut round, and again, I'm not particularly worried about it being 100% following the guide, because I wasn't particularly too careful when I drew the guidelines. But be very careful if you're using a sharp blade. Make sure you keep yourself positioned so that if it jumps or skips, you're not going to destroy yourself. A good friend of mine here in Bulgaria the other week, or month, or relatively recently, managed to chop his finger off on a table saw. Actually chopped it off. Accidents happen, and they can happen to any of us, and he is an experienced man who made one mistake, and he now has lost the entirety of one finger and has half a thumb on one of his hands, and I believe it's his primary hand as well. So just be really careful. So I'll cut this out, and then I'll come back in for the next stage when it's done. Because I've done cardboard, I have to do an extra step which isn't in the instructions, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting masking tape around the edges. So tearing a strip off and sealing the edge up. This is so that we don't have that corrugated look to the edge of the terrain piece. So I'll go for round now. I've got some thinnish masking tape. It doesn't need to be that thick, but just that wide, just whatever you have to hand is fine if you're going to be following along with cardboard. And I will go around all around the edges like this to fill that in. So I'll get that done, and then I'll be back for step 2 very shortly. It won't take me very long, as you can see. There we are, that's done, and that looks nice. That's going to be perfect. So stage 2, step 2, is contouring the base. Giving the base some gentle rises prevents the campsite from appearing unnaturally flat. Foam card is used to give the base this shape and contour. Cut the foam card into rough shapes, then using a craft knife to shave the edges into gradual slopes. Glue these around the base as you see fit. To make the fire pit, cut out a rough circle of foam card, about 10 centimetres, 4 inches in diameter. Sorry, leaning across to read here. With a craft knife. Next, cut a smaller hole out of the middle of your foam card, about 3 centimetres, 1 inch in diameter, and glue the fire pit in the approximate centre of your hardboard base. So I have some scraps and bits here, so what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to contour around. You can see some of them already have quite an interesting shape, so I'm just going to position them like that. And I will shave those down. I have my trusty knife here, my Stanley knife here. And what I'm going to do next is, when I've done this and shaped these, I will then go and get another piece to make the fire pit out of. So let's first of all carve these down. Again, the same applies as before. Be really careful when you're doing this sort of thing with a knife. Don't cut yourself, because while we're modelling a war game, real blood is not what we want to see on the tabletop. So we'll just shave those down, cut the corners off There's very few 90 degrees in nature, so don't have things too straight or too regular ever in your making. And if you're a little unsure, you can even just do it with your fingernails. Just pick at it and it'll kind of loosen. This is XPS, obviously not a foam board, but it's the same idea. So that's one of them done. I will get the rest done and be back to show you how I'm going to glue them in place and also how I'm going to make the fire pit. So that will fit very nicely there. And I'll get the rest done now and I will invite you back in a very short while. I've shaved up those little sections, those little shapes, and now what I'm going to do is work on this area for the fire pit. So this is a 10 centimetre square-ish. So let's move the base out of the way, and what we'll do is actually we will mark out and cut the centre first so that I can see where that's going to be. So that's going to be around like that. So let's get my pencil, and the good thing, this is very, very thin. I'll do, yep, very thin XPS, as you can see. It's is it 1 centimetre? Yes, 1 centimetre thick XPS, and so it's easy to cut and easy to break, but it's also quite delicate, so be very careful. Now I'm doing this with a very big knife. I probably should be doing this with a smaller craft knife. Actually, you know what? Let's follow my advice. Let's grab a smaller craft knife out, which I have very handily here, which is going to make it easier for me with a standard X-Acto blade on it to actually hack out this section. So there we are. Push that out and done. So now we can kind of contour that in a bit, like so. And there we have a fire pit. So what we'll now do is contour the rest of it. And what I will do is I will also shave the top off, because I like to have a little bit more texture and variety to the shape. So I'll just get that done. There we are. We now have a very rough looking, beautiful fire circle, so fire pit. So what I'll do is I'll grab the base in and put the knife away, and then we'll glue this all down, and I'm only going to use, some PVA glue, because that's going to be absolutely sufficient. So get the PVA, put a little bit on the bottom, a very small amount, spread it out, and the rest of our work will eventually add more solidity to this, so this will be absolutely sufficient. I normally use gator glue for this kind of thing, but I don't think it's really necessary. So we'll just glue these in place like so, getting them positioned so that it looks quite nice. Try and think about how it will look when it's painted up. There we are, and finally we'll get the fire pit in, like that. And I will leave that to dry. So there we are, first 2 steps done. It's time for me to finish up for the evening and go and get to sleep if I can. And I'll be back tomorrow to do the next step, which is going to be painting. This is dried overnight. I put some weights on it and it's secured well enough for the next step, so that's really good. Painting the base is step 3. Once the glue is dry, paint a thin coat of textured paint over the top of the whole base. This does 2 things: fills in any gaps, and gives the base a rugged look, ideal for a campsite floor. You will have to leave the base for 3 or 4 hours to let the textured paint dry completely. Next, paint the whole base brown. So I'm going to do this in one stage because I don't use textured paint. I'll be painting my terrain paint on, which you can see a link to how to make that in the description below, and then I've got a big bucket here at the back which has my sifted sand in it. So what it suggests to do, paint the whole base brown, then mix brown and yellow together and dry brush this mix over the whole model, which I will do actually because I've not done that before, so I'll try that one out. So anyway, first of all what we're going to do is we're going to put the brown paint all over this and drop the sand in. So I will pop some music on and you can see the whole process. I think it's quite useful to show. I've just mixed up another batch actually just before starting, so hopefully this is going to be nice and thick and it's going to work very well. So I'll pop some music on now and you can see the whole process. There you go, you can see it's quite an agricultural process. I'm not looking at painting it on delicately, and I'm certainly not looking at scattering the sand on delicately. However, this works because as quick as that is, and in that time I've not cut, I can pick that up and tip that sand into the bucket, which I will shift over. It's heavy because I did a lot of sifting the other day, and that will empty off. And what I want to keep is just on the edge of too big. I'm going to do that a little bit differently, but that is already drying, as you can see. It was a bit messy, but that is already drying, so I can tip that straight down onto the cardboard, and now leave that to dry, and that will now look fine. So the next stage will be for me to paint brown over that again, as I say, to put the next cover on top. And when I do that, I'll paint black in the centre, but that can be left to dry now for a couple of hours, and then I'll be back for the next step. It's been a couple of hours, it's lunchtime, just after. So what I'm going to do now is put the next coat on. So I have black paint, which is black terrain paint, and I have my brown terrain paint, the same as I used to glue down the original, or stick down the original sand. So what I'm going to do is, this is all pretty much solid, but I'm going to put another coat over the top of this just to give it the colour I'm looking for. You can see I've actually added a little bit more water to this to make it a bit more solid. And what I probably should do is just empty off the loose, which I hadn't done before starting the video. There we are, so the final loose bits are off. That'll make it a bit easier for me to brush. So what I'll do is I will put brown paint all over most of the base. Again, this is my terrain paint, so it's a mix of PVA, about 50-50 PVA and paint and water, so an equal mix, 30-30-30 I should say probably. So I'll do that over most of it, and then the black is going to go in the centre, so let's do that while I'm on camera. This is basically the same technique with PVA and black paint instead of brown paint, and a bit of water, and that will go here in the fire pit and just a little bit out of the fire pit as well. There we are. So I'll get that done. Won't bother running the camera. You've seen people painting before. And I'll bring you back in when it's time to do the next step. Now for the bit that's new for me, which I'm actually quite excited about. It says paint the whole base brown, which as you can see I've done. Then mix brown and yellow together and dry brush this mix over the whole model, which I've not done before, brown and yellow. So you can see here I've got some brown and I've got some yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it all together. Okay, like that. Using this soft brush, as you can see it's a very soft brush. And then I'm going to dry brush it. So let's see what that looks like, shall we? Might need to be a bit drier than that. It does bring out some interesting textures, doesn't it? Never done that before. There we are. What a good idea. I shouldn't be surprised, should I really? Because every time they do something and I'm like, yeah, I've not done that before, but I'll give it a go. These guys that wrote this, these guys at Agostini or whoever it was that actually wrote these, they were just the publisher, weren't they? They knew their shizzle. There we are, dry brush brown, a little bit heavy there, but that'll get covered over with flock anyway. So I can now leave some areas unflocked and have a really interesting effect. That may go down in my list of techniques. Honestly, that might do. I might use that on lots more boards. Great, very pleased. That's come out very well. Next up, flocking, which I'll do very shortly. Okay, now that I've turned my microphone on, I will start from the beginning because I was filming this and didn't realise the microphone wasn't on because I'm an idiot. Anyway, so what I've done is I've got my terrain glue and I've painted this onto the base. Just not everywhere because I want to have some of the dirt showing through and some of the dry brushing that I did showing through. And I've done it not very thick, as you can see, and in not all the places. So now that we've got that painted on, what I'm going to be doing is scattering my homemade flock. And I've got 3 different colours, which I'm going to scatter all over in different areas. First of all, I'll be starting with my dark green, which is normally my base. I'm actually running out of this. I'm going to need to make some more. And the fun thing with this was this isn't actually a pot colour. It's not just a case of throwing sawdust in with some paint. I actually need to mix this up. This is one of the darker greens that I buy mixed with black. And the challenge will be to get the same colour because I really like it. And of course I didn't record the proportions. Anyway, that's another subject. There we are. That now has been flocked, so I'll let that dry and then I'll come and I'll put another overcoat of the scenic glue to seal it, but I'll do that later, and then we'll move on to the next step. So that is the base completed. This is dried nicely now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the same glue as I used for gluing it down, and I'm going to put a coat of that over the top of the whole of it to seal it. And then that is the final step on this. Now, one thing to say if you're doing this, it looks very, very, very white. But don't worry, PVA does dry clear, and if you do this, it will be absolutely bulletproof and it won't fall off. If you don't do this, then in 6 months' time, you'll find your flock is scattering all over your table and you'll be a sad person. Another thing to say is if you do find your flock falls off, then take your terrain to hospital, give it a good solid coating of PVA, and then it'll be all good again. So I'm going to get that done. As I say, it does look terrifying, but just need to let it dry properly and completely, and then it won't be a problem. And we'll then move on to the next step on this build, which is going to be putting in place the actual fire and then doing some of the other bits and pieces like a bedroll and what have you. But we'll let this dry completely overnight first. So I'll get that done. You've seen it all now. I'll just finish that off camera, and I'll bring you back later on, tomorrow probably, or the next day even maybe, I'm not sure, when I come to the next stage. The official build is going really well, so I thought I'd get started and start to think about how I'm going to do my more advanced build or alternative build for a camp. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, what I'm going to be doing is the camp where Frodo and friends are attacked by the Witch King and friends below Weathertop. So Attack on the Camp at Weathertop is what the title is. I've used the same website, hennethannon.net, to source the inspiration and words for it. So let me read out the couple of paragraphs which I'm using to inform this build. On the western flank of Weathertop they found a sheltered hollow, at the bottom of which there was a bowl-shaped dell with grassy sides. There they left Sam and Pippin with the pony and their packs and luggage. Sean and Peregrine had explored the small dell and the surrounding slopes. Not far away, they found a spring of clear water in the hillside, and near it footprints not more than a day or two old. In the dell itself, they found recent traces of a fire and other signs of a hasty camp. Sam came upon a small store of firewood, neatly stacked. Now, something itches me that there's also a stone with Gandalf's G etched on it, which I will dig into, and if that is the case, I can't remember if that's in the campsite or on the top of Weathertop, which I will remember and find out, and I'll add it if I need to. But for now, I'm not worrying about that. And what I've done is something I don't normally do now. I'm doing this a little more for some of these more complicated builds. This is not where my artistic side comes out at all. As you can see, if I zoom in on that, it's like scratchings of a drunken pigeon. However, it is going to be enough for me to know roughly what it is I'm going to achieve and how I'm going to lay out the board, so I can then translate that into 3D, which is where my skills more lie. At the top you can see just a rough idea that what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be having a sloping down from the back towards the front, and what that will have is it will have a bowl-shaped dell, probably a little bit more inboard than this diagram is showing, so it will be a sheltered, and then there'll be a little bit of a dell with a little bit of a lip coming up towards the front. So that's how that'll work. Over towards the back right hand corner of the board, and obviously higher up, I will have a spring, so water will be coming out from a crack in the rocks, and then we'll be running down a little kind of riverbed, a little stream bed, and then off the side, and that will be where you'll have the footsteps, like a muddy patch of footsteps, maybe around a natural bowl which collects water in it, which does happen quite a lot. So a tiny little fall into a little pool, and then it will trickle on out, and there'll be a bit of mud around that, and then from that zone through to where the dell is, there'll be a slight track, but not a very obvious one, maybe just a couple of footprints and a bit of pressed down earth and pressed down foliage. I forgot the word then. Between the two, there'll be a little ridge. So the dell will be literally sitting in a bowl, and then it'll kind of go up and then up a bit more, and then that's where the stream will be. So that's just a little bit of an idea about the topography. If we have a look in this corner here, what we've got is the idea of roughly what the actual dell will look like. So we'll have an old fire, we'll have the pile of firewood, we'll maybe have a collapsed or damaged tent, maybe some pots and pans stacked nicely somewhere so that travellers are able to cook if they haven't got any cooking implements, that sort of thing. So there we are, that's my design, that's what I'm going to be working towards. I thought it'd be interesting to show you this stage. It is, as I said at the beginning, it's not something I do very often, but for these sorts of things I think it's a really good idea to kind of put your ideas down, sketch out a few times. You don't have to be Picasso, well this may be closer to Picasso, you don't have to be an artist to sketch your ideas out, so long as you can understand it, that's what matters. So next up we're going to have a look at what materials I'm going to use, and we're going to get started on this build. So I've had a couple of different ideas about the base I'm going to use and the size of the build I'm going to do, and what I think I've decided on is the same size as the previous build, which is about 60 centimeters square, as you can see here, but this is actually corrugated plastic. You can see the corrugations, it's kind of sign maker's plastic, and it's in the same batch of materials I bought when I was looking for different basic materials, and I got the plasterboard tile, which is what I used underneath Welling Hall. The question here for me is how well is it going to actually take and stick materials. So I'm going to be using gator glue, which seems to stick to everything, and I'm really hoping that it works. If it doesn't work, then at least I'll find out, and I can always go back to the plaster tile, which I have. So that's going to be my base. For most of the actual terrain and scenicking, I am going to use white expanded foam, XPS, not the hard stuff that I use for the details. However, what I'm thinking I might do is, because I'm worried about this actually adherence of this, I might try to stick some 1 centimeter blue XPS to this, and see how well that goes. If it sticks well, then I've got a base that I can carve out, and I can use the heat gun to put some elements in, and that will potentially be the level to which the dell sits, and then I can build up around that using the white foam and get the contours. So that's my plan. Let's get it done. I will get the blue foam and I will try to stick it on, and I will bring you along for that ride as I'm doing it. Here we have some 1 centimetre blue foam and the towel to which I'm going to stick it. And it is times like these that you find that these foam cuts are not actually perfectly straight. This end here is not my cut. That's how it's come out of the pack, and it's bent. So what I'm going to have to do is actually position this slightly inboard, because the sides are straight, so that's okay. And then I'm going to need to be really careful here that I don't make a mistake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my bradawl, which I don't have to hand, but is just stuck over here on my magnetic strip. And I'm going to lean very hard on top of this and use the bradawl to score where I want to cut. Like so. And now I can move this out of the way and I see where my cut is going to be, and I can come in with my straight edge and my knife, and I can make that cut. So I don't yet have, I am looking for a safety ruler that doesn't cost the earth and is longer than 30 centimetres. They're quite hard to find. If anyone has one or can recommend a supplier, please do let me know, because this kind of thing does make me nervous. I like to have a safety ruler rather than just a normal ruler when doing cuts. But as is always the case, if you're careful like that, and you don't try and do the cut straight away, but you do it gently with multiple passes, then it doesn't jump and rip and tear. It just slices really nicely like that. You get a lovely clean cut, and it's less of a risk of cutting yourself. So let's do the other side. And there we are. So now that we have that blue foam prepared, I will get the plastic back and we will look to glue it on. So let me grab that from over here. But that now will be fine to stick on top of there. And any overlap I can trim off once it's dry. So what we do is we get a gator glue, which I hope is not dead. I do have a spare, so let me just give that a shake. Okay, that was more difficult. I turned the camera off and I've just fought and managed to get the lid off. This is my old pot of gator glue, which I damaged the lid to, and so it leaks and it dries. I do have a new pot, which I'll get to once this one is absolutely dead, but I hate waste, so I'm going to use this until I absolutely can't get it open or get any more use out of it, because that's how I am. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to come along, and yes, it does pour, does squeeze. We're going to put the gator glue around the edge like so. This does expand, not a huge amount, but it does, so just be aware that even with it as that much of a gap, it may actually go out over the edges. So make sure if this is sitting on something, you either put paper down or you don't care if it gets little globs of gator glue. And there we are, that should hold it in place. If it's going to, that will be enough. So I will now put the lid back on that. We will put the blue foam on, and then I will get a weight. I have one around somewhere. 1 second. There we are. I have my weights, and I will weight this down like so. Now, gator glue does dry quite quickly, which is another reason why I like it so much. You're not having to wait days and days for it to dry and go off, so I'll know very quickly if this is going to work or not. Just make sure that's lined up. There we are. So we'll leave that to go off, and I'll come back later and let you see whether it's worked or not. We'll find that out together. It's now the evening. This was done at lunchtime, so it's been left for a good few hours. So let's lift these weights off and see how well that is stuck. This is going to be a discovery for me as well, because I've not moved them. You will notice I did add a couple more weights just in places, just to make sure that those corners were pressed down, because it was lifting a little bit, just how it is. So we'll lift all these weights off, taking care not to drop them. And then let's see what we find. it appears to have stuck okay, which is great news. There we are. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and the proof of the gluing is in the sticking, and that has stuck fine. So what I could do now is start to really lay out where I want to have my contours, get my heat gun and start to press down in where the dell's going to go and build up the contours at the back. And I'll do that probably not tonight now, maybe I'll get time, but I've got other things going on. So I'll do that very soon and we'll get this build on the way. But I'm very pleased that it looks like this is going to be another good way of basing tiles. Back to this after a break of a couple of days working on some other things, and in that time I've been thinking about how to progress next. That's mainly why I paused. I wasn't totally sure on the next steps to do, so I just took a step back. I've decided now I'm going to sketch onto this blue top here, onto this blue foam, roughly where I want things to go, just so that I can view it and then I can start to build up the elements using other insulation foam and other techniques, take down the area that I want for the bottom of the campsite, etc, etc. So that's going to be my best bet. So I did that sketch which I showed you earlier on, which is what I'm going to be working off. So over here, and I think probably a little bit more central than I did on the original sketch, I'm going to have the campsite, and I have my very useful Gandalf miniature that I'm using at the moment a couple of times because it's one I have to hand to give me some idea of scale. So a campsite is going to want to be big enough for Gandalf and a few other people to kind of sit around in. So the rough extent of this dell, I think, using my nice Sharpie, is going to be something around that. That's going to be where we're going to have the base of the dell. So we'll have a little old fire here, my nice fire picture. We'll have a stack of wood over here, and then we'll potentially have maybe some pots and pans for Sam over here, and maybe I'll have a tent there. So that's roughly what the actual campsite is going to look like. We're then going to have, up in this top corner, we're going to have the rocks, and the little stream is going to come out and is going to flow off to the edge here. Now this is going to be quite a lot higher in terms of actual elevation, but still it's giving me the idea about where I want things to build up. What we'll have is we'll have a little pool here. So this will be a little bit of a falls, and then this will be the muddy footprints around here, and they will come in this direction towards the campsite. There we are, so we have a little path there. And finally what we'll do is the ridge. So this will be going, as I say, will be sloping upwards, and I will make sure that there is a ridge between here and where that stream runs down through a little water valley thing, rivulet. So there we are. That has meant that will give me enough of a guidance for me now to be able to place the different bits of polystyrene that I'm going to use and stick them in place. So I will gather them together, get myself ready, and I'm going to start gluing them right away. I've made a start on this, as you can see. I've got the Proxon out over at the back of the bench. I don't know whether it's in shot, just about, yes. And I've been cutting up some of this white foam, which I have lying around, loads and loads lying around. If you've watched my video about tidying or hoarding or whatever it is I'm doing, you can see the pink paint and some cement on this. This is actually left over from when we are renovating the building we're in, and we put insulation on the walls outside. So it's been there for a couple of years in the roof, and I'm working my way through it because I hate waste. And why not? Why would you pay for something twice? I've already paid for this, so I'm going to use it. So what you can see here is the rough layout that I'm looking at doing. We have down here the camp, and I've got a circle here which will be very much more smoothly sloped in from each of these, but these are big blocks, 6 centimetre maybe, even something like that. Yeah, 6 centimetre foam, so quite 60 mil thick. At the back here we have the ridge, which it will be sloping up towards, and here we have the ridge which will be going between the water, which is back here, and the campsite back here. So there'll be a little bit of a saddle for the trail to go through, and then the ridge will continue on round here, and that will create this sheltered spot that is described in the book. So I'm going to carry on with my tools. I'm going to start to use my red grass gaming hot tools. I can't remember if it's that or not, but my hot tools as well to start to shape out and carve out these. I might leave the camera running for a bit, turn some music on so you can watch, but I just thought I'd do a quick talkie, show you where I'm up to, and then I'm going to crack on. I've got a little bit of time while Rosie sleeps, so yeah, onwards. I had to stop them because it was getting really difficult moving around with the light, which I have just given me some illumination. I was getting in the way, and also I needed to go and use the Proxon to do some cutting. So I just thought I'd stop the camera, get that done quickly, and then come back. And what you can see here is the state of play right now. So let me turn this round so it's a little bit more obvious to see. And what we have is we have the bowl here, and this will also have like a ridge, something coming up. That'll be have a ridge coming down here, which I've not done yet. We have the ridge here through which this path goes. I went a little bit violent here with my hot cutter, never mind, but the stream will be coming down and going around here, and we have the bank coming up, so this is the ridge that this path is going to go through. I might even rebuild that, do that totally again, and have it so that there's a muddy bit here and then like a path between rocks coming down, so it's not quite such a big scoop out. But other than that, I think I'm really pleased with how that's looking. Had some fun there because of the concrete that was actually on the foam, so I had to cut that off with my knife. But after that, the hot wire cutter has done really well. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to glue everything that's in place. I'm going to put these down, and I'm just going to use PVA at this stage because I will be coming over this with the modelling compound, which will then also hold things in place. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to dot glue on. I'm not going to put much glue on. Maybe I will use the gator glue, but I'm not going to do a huge solid glue, so that if I change my mind I can easily pop things off. So I'll get that done. I'll do that in stages, clamp them down, and then I'll come back later. It's becoming quite difficult for me to carve and hold things in place. Some things are getting quite out of shape, as you can see. That's not quite right. Just need to make it a little bit more solid and secure, and then I'll be able to carry on with the carving and with the terrain, with getting the terrain in the correct configuration. So I'll get that done, and I'll bring you back later when it's dry and I'm about to do the next step. On and off through the day, when I've had breaks, I've been building up these contours with the odds and sods of the white foam which I had lying around, and I'm happy enough with how that looks right now. So we'll just quickly talk you through it. What we're going to have here is we're going to have a cliff, and just out of shot I have my bark which will be being used to make the cliff face. So I'll be sticking bark on using the gator glue, and then that will then be able to look like a proper cliff face. There's going to be a cliff face coming all the way along here, The rest of it, once that's dried, I'm going to then fill in just the gaps, so just the smooth areas that I want to have actually contoured up with Luke's APS's modelling compound. And what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to texture and make it look, because it's all going to be rock with very, very few bits of greenery on it. It's going to be quite a barren looking area, because that's how I think it would be. So I'm about to start building up this rock face. I thought I'd quickly show you how far I got, because I have actually done not like lots and lots and lots, but just a bit, as you can see, like stuck a bit down and then stuck a bit down there. Got a really nice shape coming up. Over here is where the stream is going to run and trickle down into a little pool, which will then be muddy. I may carve that out a little bit more while I'm doing this. I'm just using the hot wire tool and bringing it through, so that might end up getting carved down a bit more, make it a little bit more of a but there might be quite a big pool here, I think, so I might just dam that off and have that actually as quite a deep pour of resin, so do it in 2 or 3 different stages. That's something I'm thinking about doing at the moment. So yes, that's where I'm up to. I will show you what it looks like when I've finished gluing the rock, but to just quickly show you, if you've not seen me do this before, what I do is I find myself sections of bark, which I like the look of. Let's just say that one. I'm not sure if it's going to be. And I offer them up. That needs to be cut, as you can see. It's quite 3D, but I offer it up against the area, and then when I'm happy, I'll come in with the gator glue, and then I'll clamp it with my clamps and leave it to dry. And then once that's done, it can be painted black, dry brushed with all sorts of colours, and it looks amazing. So I will show you what that looks like before I start doing the Luke's APS compound. When I've done this cliff, I'll show you what it looks like, so you'll see that in a few minutes for my time and in a second for yours. There we are. I've stuck some of the bark onto the front of that using the gator glue. I'll leave that to dry, it won't take very long, and then I'll come back later this evening hopefully and get stuck in with the modelling compound, and I will show you how that looks when it is done. So yeah, progress is being made continually on this project at the moment, and it's going really well. I'm really pleased with it, and it's going to look pretty much how I hoped, which is, well, better than I hoped. There we are. I've done my Luke's APS modelling compound, and I'm pretty happy with how that's worked out. What I do need to do, doing some brief pans and zooms, I'm going to want to probably get the heat gun on that and just dimple and depress that flat area a little bit to give it some more texture. And I might do some more over where this plunge pool is going to be. You can see that I have decided to leave the big pool, and I'm going to do a deep pour over several mixes. I think that will look really nice. But overall, those are the only 2 places that might change. Overall, I'm very, very pleased with how that's looking. It's really starting to take shape, and next up, after I've done that, I will be looking at doing the stone texture. So I'm going to be using grout and a mix of dust and gravel from my back bank, which has worked very well for me in the past. So there we are. I did that at the same time as doing some other work as well, so that was good. It's a very quick process using this modelling compound, and I've specifically and deliberately left it quite rough because I want it to look a bit like a rocky ground, so I've not smoothed it out as much as I normally do. So there we are. I'm now going to go to bed because I'm tired, and I'll be back to this at some point tomorrow, hopefully. As is traditional, I forgot to turn my mic on, so here is VoiceOver Beard. I changed my mind here, and I decided to not do the deep pour and the big pool, and instead to carve out a stream, as you can see there, with a hot wire cutter, and glue in a blob over the top of the previously applied Luke's APS modelling compound. So yeah, that was just a change of mind. I just decided that the actual description in the book did not include a big deep pool. It did include a bit of mud and a stream, so I should really model what the book says. So that's what that is, and I've glued it in place very carefully using the gator glue as usual. Have you ever had a build that you just keep changing your mind on, you just can't decide, and then you do new things and new things? This certainly is one. Well, you can see I've turned the board round. I will rotate it again in a minute for another clip, but I thought I'd show the behind of this before I turn it, because I realised that the way that the location is described is that it's a sheltered dell below the slopes of Amon Hill, Weathertop, and so I've put a cliff. So I've made my cliff run along further, rather than having this as a slope. I've had this as a slope that runs up to a cliff, and I'm much happy with how it looks. Of course, this is another good thing about me taking a little bit longer on these builds, that I can make these changes without panicking about actually getting it done and delivered on time. So what I'll do now is I'll quickly rotate this and show you what it looks like from the front, and also show you what the stream area looks like now since I've also redone that. There we are from the front, and I think I'm actually going to leave it pretty much looking like that. I'm not going to I don't think I'm going to do very much more texturing on it, because it looks like quite a sheer cliff, and yeah, I think it's going to be quite nice. It's also slightly overhanging, which was the idea I wanted. I wanted the idea that this really was quite sheltered, and that maybe the top of this cliff is just where the end of my diorama finishes, and maybe that cliff continues on higher up. So that's the kind of impression I'm trying to go for. Don't know whether I'm going to achieve it, but we shall see. I have left the idea that there might be some kind of a hole or a cave. That's what this is, and I may end up indeed putting something behind that so that it looks like it's a cave, with painting it black and what have you, so that yes, there's a little bit more interest going on up there. Finally, for this clip, I will just do a zoom. Not a zoom, a rotate, but anyway, a pan. So this is now what the river stream area looks like. As you can see, what I've done is I've filled in around the side, I put some XPS in there, and I've got my stream area coming down like this, and I've got the area that I can do as a muddy patch just here, where I can have the footprints in as well. So I'm much happy with that in terms of what the actual diorama should look like. So yes, I'm finally getting close to being able to put the next layer on. However, I have noticed that there are a couple of areas that do still need a little bit of filling, which I'm going to do, and then I'll be along to do the black grout. You can see the black grout is actually in shot. I've got it ready, but I haven't used it. So yeah, I'll be able to get that done at some point soon, hopefully. But I'm still not in a panic, still not rushing, which is nice. So what I'm about to do is I have my heat gun, which you can see here. There we are, that's my heat gun, and I'm going to use this to put some textures into this area, and also potentially some of the other ones around, but I'll just do this area on camera. And the reason why I'm doing this on camera is people ask, I've seen lots of questions, doesn't it set fire to it or melt it too much? Not if you do it very carefully. Now the other thing to say is I have an open window right there, I have an open window right there, and I have a fan behind me here blowing towards those two open windows. So do always do this in a very well ventilated space, because otherwise you might, well, it's not very nice. So the heat gun is also not very quiet, so I will do a bit of it, turn it off and explain what I've been doing, so you can watch this now. That's still warm, so be careful. I move in and out very gently, and I don't hold it in any one place for too long, and I certainly don't get too close. But what you can see is that's actually gone down, and it's actually separated away from my, the heat has travelled through, which is a bit of an issue. I maybe got that a bit hot. So I'm going to have to put some more of the Luke's APS to kind of bank that down. But anyway, that's how you use a heat gun to put in textures or a little bit of shape to your foam. That's now dry enough to touch, cool enough to touch. That's really nice. I'm really pleased. It's exactly what I was looking for, apart from that. So I might just chip away a bit and put some new stuff there. So there we are. I'm going to carry on, do a little bit more of that around the rest of the build potentially, and then we're finally ready to do the grout and sand, grout and dirt even. Now for the moment I've been waiting for and working towards for quite a long time. You can see that I have filled in the gap that occurred when I did the heat. I just used some wood filler there. I didn't bother getting another mix of the modelling compound out. It was enough, it was only a small bit. So what I'm about to do is mix up some black grout with dirt from the back bank and PVA, and I'm going to put it all over everything. Apart from maybe this, I might just do that with black paint, but everything else is going to get this coating of the grout, which is going to make it harder and also going to give it a texture. So I will point the camera and show you the mix, because there are tips and it is a bit difficult sometimes mixing grout, so it's good to see. So I'll show you that, and then I'll do the rest of it probably off camera, because two reasons. One, after my catastrophic failure of the hard drive, I'm running low on storage until my new hard drive arrives, so I don't want to film too long clips at the moment, because I just cannot edit or store them anywhere, and 2, I'm going to be just painting it over. So you've seen people use a paintbrush before, so hopefully you'll know and you'll see how it is. So I won't do very much filming there, but let's point down, get this mix started and go from there. So you can see here I have my pot, and in that there is some grout. Now what I've done is I've put 2 heap spoons of grout, and then just using the spoon I've broken up any lumps and bumps. Often I'll put this through a sieve, but yeah, you want to make sure there's no big lumps in there. I then here in this big bucket have my sifted sand from the back bank, and I'm going to put 1 heaped teaspoon in with that, or maybe 1 flat teaspoon in with that. Don't want too much, then we'll mix it together. The next thing that we do is we put some PVA. There, that looks good, doesn't it? And then we put a lot less than you would think water. And this is key, you don't want too much water. Now the thing with grout is it's hydrophobic, or it seems so to me. It doesn't seem to want to mix with water. But with the addition of the sand and the PVA, it will actually start to combine a lot easier than if you're doing it without. So I will mix and mix and mix. And the thing that I wanted to show you is that while it looks like it's not mixing, do not be tempted to add more liquid, because otherwise you'll end up with a really, really watery paste that won't apply very well. And you can see that it actually mixes quite quickly now that we've got PVA in there, and with the gravel it breaks up the surface tension of the water and allows the grout to mix nicely. And there we have our lovely grout mix. So having said don't add much water, I might add a little bit more to that just to make it a bit easier for me to spread. But when I say a little more, I mean literally a drizzle like that. A little goes a long way in terms of this liquid. You can see that is already becoming a lot more watery and spreadable. Right, so now we'll point the camera down. I'll show you the first stages of me applying it, and then I'll get it done. I'm probably going to stick up a YouTube video on to watch while I'm doing this as well. Obviously for this stage, get a brush you don't care about, because while it does wash out, yeah, you don't want to be using one of your Winsor & Newtons, put it that way. This is just a literally 50p brush from the local hardware store, and as you can see all I'm doing is just brushing it on, and it's going to be giving that texture, and it's also going to make the whole thing much harder and more hard wearing, and also save it should I decide to spray, which I probably won't, but any spraying, it means that the foam won't get eaten. So it's as simple as that. Mix up, much less water than you think, because it goes a long way. If it doesn't look like it's mixing, just keep folding, and eventually suddenly you'll see, hang on a minute, it's suddenly turning into wateriness. And finally use an old knackered brush. Right, I'll get this done, I'll bring you back when it's finished and show you the next stages, and I'm going to stick on some, I think probably Tabletop CP, watching the live stream that they did last night. So I hope you enjoy. When I come back, cheers. A couple of days later than I expected to get back to this, because of various reasons, such as busyness and other things. However, I'm very pleased with how this has come out with the grout. There are some areas which need touching up, and you can't really see from the angle, but there's a bits that I missed underneath these overhangs. However, that's fine, because what I'm going to be doing now is taking some of my terrain glue here, which is PVA water with a little bit of washing up liquid mixed in, and I'm going to be scattering some of my number 4, number 3 and number 2 sifted sands. So the number 4 is largest, obviously, and then number 3 is the next size, and then number 2 is the smallest I'm going to put down. I'm not going to put in number 1 because I've already got that texture with what I've painted on with the grout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on some areas and then scatter on first the big, then the medium, and then the small. So one of the areas I'm also going to definitely do, but only probably with the small, is where the river is. So let's do that first. I'm not going to run the camera for the entire process. I'm still don't yet have my storage solution, so I'm still a little light on storage for copying clips, so I can't be quite as profligate as I normally am with super long videos. But yeah, so I'll just do a little bit of this, and then I'll come back at the end of the evening and show you what it looks like. So we'll take that, and on this one we're going to do, so number 3 and number 2, I'm not going to do any number 4 size, and we're just going to scatter that over. And once this is dried, then I'm going to come in with some black terrain paint, which is normal house paint mixed with PVA, and I'm going to paint the whole thing again in black, and then I'll come in and do the dry brush. And that's why I don't mind the fact that I've maybe missed a few areas, because I can fix it in that process. So there we are. So I'm going to do this for over the most of the board. I want to get this to be quite a rocky look, as I've said before. So yeah, I'm just going to scatter lots and lots of this talus around, and hopefully that will make it look really nice. So final bit for this video, I'll show you. We're going to do it at the base of this cliff. We're going to put quite a lot of bigger stones around here, like they're falling down that cliff. When that's done, I can cover that with black paint, and that will dry brush up really, really nicely. So I'll bring you back at the end of this process to show you what it looks like. There we are, that's done, and I'll let that to dry overnight, and maybe hopefully tomorrow have some time before work to put the black paint over the top of it, because yeah, I want to get this finished now. I'm really close, as it happens. It's not far off, it looks a long way off, but it's going to come together very fast now. So anyway, I'll leave that to dry, and I'll bring you along for the next step when I get to it. The gravel is stuck on nicely, as you can see. So what I'm now going to do is come along with the black terrain paint and paint over the top to seal that down. One thing I have noticed, however, is I have a little bit of an issue here. Now this is where I did the heat application, and it looks like the coat that I've put over the top of grout and paint has not actually adhered to the XPS underneath, which is a bit disappointing. So I'm going to have a think about what to do about that. I may have to do another application, or I may need to put some sand and my more traditional sand and paint mix down just to make it tougher, or it may be alright once I've done one coat of my terrain paint. So I'm going to get that done. I'm going to do this in 2 stages. I will just quickly adjust the camera so you can see some of the places where I've missed, and I'm going to need to probably put the actual board on its back to paint these bits. So 1 second, I'll be back in a sec. You can see in this shot a couple of points there where there's white showing through the bark, and then as I pan across the back, you can see now just in the centre there's some more, and then as I pan further over you can see even more along that back bank. The reason for that is I just couldn't see it at the time when I was painting, so I'll go in now with some black paint and make sure I cover all those bits as well. So I'm going to get that done, and I'll bring you back when I come to the next stage. With all the effort going into the custom or the advanced or the different build, it's probably time now to get back to the official one. And this is going to be the next step, which is called campsite equipment. Step 1, making a fire. To make a fire, you will need to collect some dry sticks or twigs. These are some that I had lying around by my fire that have probably been there for a year, so they're going to be nice and dry, from your garden or a park. Cut the twigs into 2 cm or 1 inch lengths. Next, glue these lengths into the fire pit in such a way that they form a cone-shaped pile. Glue some stones around the fire pit as shown, so just around here. Then paint them black and dry brush them grey. If you like, you can glue on some cotton wool to represent smoke. Arrange and glue any leftover twigs into neat piles ready next to the fire. These can be the spare logs ready to be burned. So I have my sharp knife, if I need it. But basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be breaking these sticks up into short lengths, as you can see, just like that. And I will break up all the sticks that I've got, and then stick them in place. So I'm going to do that breaking apart, and I'll bring you back when I come to the gluing. This isn't the first time I've come across the Battle Games in Middle-earth addiction to the thought that you make fires in when you're in the wild like that. Now certainly that is a way of doing it, However, I think what I want to do is I want to do the stones first, get them painted, and then I'm going to be able to arrange my sticks. My sticks are nicely all cut, as you can see, or broken up just there. So that's so I do have lots of sticks. However, I think what I want to do is stick these stones in place and then get them right. Now what I'm going to do is glue them down, leave them to dry, and then I'm going to just add some black wash to the inside. Rather than painting them black and dry brushing them, they're going to be this, stones aren't all black. These are grey stones, and I've got another couple of the white stones like that, which I will then also scatter around so that they are, you can see where they've gathered the stones from. So they've brought them in from not very far. So I'll put a couple of stones kind of like that on the base as well. So I'm going to do that now. I'll do that just with the PVA. So I've got my PVA here. So what I'm going to do is very simply take the stones off, which I've just done, run a bead of PVA around the edge of the fire area, and then put the stones back in place. So let's do it left-handed. See how badly this goes. There we are, a little bit too much there, and lost a little bit of control there, but that's fine, it will dry clear. So what we're going to do is we're just going to place our stones back on, like so. It's a bit of a messy application, that just goes to show. Someone said to me today about being a real modeler. You're a real modeler if you're making things. You're a real modeler if you're making mistakes. So just get stuck in, because the only way to learn is by doing stupid things and making mistakes. So there we are. That will dry. What we'll do is we will stick these down here as well, with some glue, and I might get some more. These stones are actually picked up off my back bank, so and they're the remainder of after I've sifted and to make the dirt that I use for some of my other builds. So we'll let that dry. Once that's dry, like I say, I'll bring it back and we will have a look at putting some washes to make it look like there's some, like they're slightly burnt or whatever over here, and then after that we'll do the wood, because yeah, that's how I want to do it. So onwards. While waiting for the fire to dry, let's have a look at the next stage, and that is bedrolls. To make a bedroll, you will need some paper towels. Now, it says here, make sure the towels are the crunchy type and not the soft absorbent type found around the kitchen. Unfortunately, I don't have any of them. I think what it's talking about is those really kind of hard, cardy ones that you used to get at school, which I haven't seen for ages and I've no idea where to get them. So instead I'm using a slightly alternative material, which is these old combat trousers. As you can see, they basically have fallen apart. They broke down quite badly with some large rips, and because I don't throw anything away, by the way, apologies for banging builders in again, because I don't throw anything away, I have kept them for a long time, and I have used them a few times in various builds for various different things. So what I'm going to do is just use this for the bedrolls and also for the tent, which is going to be happening in the next little while. So it says to cut some paper towel into strips approximately 6 centimeters by 10 centimeters. So let's do something approximately 6 centimeters by 10 centimeters. I've got my sharp scissors. How about that? So what it then says is roll the towel so that the folds are on the inside. So it's saying to do that, basically, I believe. Like so. There you are, you've got yourself a little roll. And then wrap a length of string around each end of the bedroll. Glue them down with super glue and cut off any excess string. So what I'm going to do is just weight that down, get myself some string, and I'll be back. We have some string. So let's wrap this around. And what we might find is we can even tie it, but I don't think I'm going to bother doing that because it'll be just too much hassle. So we'll get the correct length by wrapping it around, like so, and then we will snip the super glue where we need it. And what I'll do is I will then get a second length around the same, just by offering it up and cutting it in roughly the same place. There we are. I then have my super glue, which you'll remember is the super glue which I probably should have thrown away a long time ago. However, I'm tight, so I have to take the lid off. And what I'm actually going to do is pop a little bit of super glue to hold each fold in place, and then I'm going to super glue the actual string into place. So we get that, we grab ourselves, this is how prepared I am for this, we grab ourselves a toothpick so that we can apply our super glue. There we are. Get a knackered toothpick, which I'm not going to use for anything else. Get some super glue, run it along there, like so, and then that will work there. And what you'll notice is super glue does actually come through the cloth, so if you're doing this, do this on the side that isn't going to be up, as it were. Let's see if actually pouring is going to be a better idea, or maybe a smudge like that. There we are, that's better, because with a smudge like that I can then fold, and that will do both parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weight that down with a little bit of weight like this, let that dry, and I'll be back very shortly to show you how I'm going to glue in place the string. My stones have dried, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some black paint. This is just my terrain paint which I have in this pot, and I'm going to take a pot of water, water my brush down a lot, just take a little bit of the black, water it down a lot like I say, and just apply it as a wash at the base and at the inside of these stones. And that is designed to make it look like kind of soot or whatever that's built up while the fire has been lit, but not to make the stones look like they're black, but actually you're just looking at what happens when you have a fire, which is things get sooty. So that'd be quite a nice effect. So we'll go in just with a very watered down black, like I say. I'm just only using the terrain paint because it's the closest black I had to hand, and that will look very nice. So the next thing is going to be to stick the sticks in place. So I will get myself ready for that and bring you back. Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop PVA into the middle and then set sticks into it, and then roll PVA over the top again, because that's going to be the quickest and most efficient method of making this fire. And as I've already said, I'm not going to be using the method that they say, because that's not how fires are made, really, is it? I mean, you make a fire, you generally lie them some kindling at the bottom and put rock logs across it to fall in like that. So we're going to make our fire up like this, and then, as I say, we'll drop a load more, some more PVA on from the top to seep down in, and that will then look like a good laid fire ready to be lit. So there we are. So we'll just position that like that, get a little bit more PVA, dribble it on from the top, and then let that to dry. There we are. Right, onwards with the rest of this. I'll leave that to dry now. That should look pretty good when it's done. Right, it's time for the next process on this. So I have a soft brush and I have some paper towel, and over here I have my light grey paint in my yogurt pot because I broke the paint ages ago. So what I'm going to do, I'll pop some music on. I don't know how much of this I'll record, but I'll pop some music on and show the process that I go through for dry brushing it. And I'm going to dry brush the entirety of this, of the terrain, because if I do decide to put something else on, like up here I'm going to be doing the pouring the stream and putting some mud, that will be done over the top of the grey anyway. So I'll pop some music on and you can enjoy watching how quickly this transforms the terrain. there we are. That took me 5 minutes-ish of dry brushing, so not very long at all. And you can really see the textures come out now really nicely. In places I've done it quite grey. I might actually leave that for a bit, think about it, because I might come back in and do another coat of that same grey and do it quite heavy, and then leave just the very depths of it, so it's quite a grey rock rather than it being such a black rock that it is at the moment. But I'm not totally sure, so I'm going to think about it for a bit and come back, and then what I'll be able to do is use a lighter grey and then finally a white to actually bring the highlights out again, like I've done there. So I might come in with this grey and just more, not quite paint it on, but do another heavier dry brush or an overbrush on top of that. So we'll see. But there we are. That's another step towards completion. Left these overnight just because I got busy, so these are now absolutely dry. So what I'm about to do is do the tying off of the straps. So how I'm going to do that is with some super glue gel. So what I'm going to do is sit the little wrap on top of the string, wrap it around, and then put the super glue gel in there. And I do have some magic spray to make super glue go off immediately, which I will make use of here. Super glue activator. Do not use this unless your windows are open, it is nasty. Quick spray, and that's now done. So I will now do the other side, which I'll do in the same way. Right, I'll do the next one and I'll bring you back for the next step shortly. So now that we've done the bedroll and the fire, and I am potentially going to go back and do some painting on the bedrolls, I'm not sure, but they need to dry yet. Let's have a look at this making a tent instruction. So it says, cut a rectangle from a piece of card about 3 centimetres by 5 centimetres. This will be the upright frame for your tent. Draw another rectangle approximately 4 centimetres by 6 centimetres for the base. Shave the edges of the tent's base with a craft knife so they are slanted. This helps to prevent the base from looking too artificial. Super glue one of the long edges of the upright along the middle of the base so that the two pieces form a T-shape. So that's nice and easy to understand. So let's get that done. So I have a bit of card here, as you can see. And what I'm going to do first of all is, it says a 3 by 5 or 4 by 6. So first of all we'll do the 6 centimetres. Now, I don't know what card they're using that's so thick that you need to shave the edges down, because frankly you can see that that's like barely anything. So yeah, anyway, so that's that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the next section out, which is going to be 5 by 3. So we'll go 5 centimetres long and then cut that out. So now what it says is to stick those so that they form a 90 degrees. Now I'm not going to do this with super glue because A, I'm not in a hurry, and B, I just don't think it's going to work very well, and C, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these heavy 90 degree tools to keep it straight, like so. So that will mean that when it dries completely upright. These sorts of tools, let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see that a bit better. Just 1 second. There we are, that's a little bit easier for you to see. So these sorts of tools are really, really useful. I can't remember, I think I got these from a local hardware shop. They weren't cheap, but they do get a lot of use. Because, yeah, for something like this, you can't really beat trying to keep things up on its uprights. So, what I'll do is I will get some super glue. Why not use super glue, eh? Change my mind. Run a bead along the bottom, like so. Set that in place and then butt my weight up, and that now will hold it in place while it dries. So the next thing to do is the canvas, so I will give that a minute or two and I'll come back with the next step. A couple of minutes later and you can see that this has dried okay. It's obviously not totally very stable, but hopefully when we put the canvas on top it will be better. Apologies for the drilling sound, as per usual, builders in, can't stop. Cut a length from a paper towel the same width as your upright. Now this paper towel is the stuff that I cannot get hold of, so I am going to go zooming out, not in. I'm going to go for my old Combats again as my canvas, which I've used for the bedrolls, but that's going to be fine. So it says cut a length about 8 centimetres and by 5 centimetres. So if we look at how wide that is, that's about 8 centimetres. So we need to cut about 5 centimetres from there. So let's do that. And then cut along that line to get our canvas. And the reason why I quite like this is these are actually really technically canvas. Now that doesn't actually look right. No, how's that right? I think I've just not done that deep enough. That's what I've not done. I need to cut further. So there we are. After a little bit of faffing, what we're going to have is we're going to have that going over the top there and then folding underneath. So it's actually going to be a little bit difficult for me to do this exactly how they suggest, because this is not paper, so it's not foldable as such. So I'm going to have a little bit of a play around off camera, whereas of course if you're using cut paper you'll be able to fold it. I'm going to have a little bit of a play around off camera. I'll be back shortly to show you what I learned and how I'm going to fix this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that doesn't follow the instructions. If you're following the instructions and using the paper towels, then fine, you can probably do what it needs to do, but I can't. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm not going to stick the canvas on just yet. I'm going to paint and texture the base first, and then I'll actually do it so that it looks like this is held down with rocks. And I may find that I might have a look at this, but I may find that I need to trim the end off, as you can see just here. So what I'll be doing is I'll stick down the canvas on each side like that and across the top, and then stick some rocks on the top so it looks like it's being held down by rocks. And I may make a couple of different styles, but this one is going to be fine, I think, like that. So the next thing to do is going to be to paint this brown, paint the floor, put some flock on, and then I can come to doing the actual canvas. So I will get myself ready for that and bring you back when I'm ready to start. It's now the evening, and I've just got back from having a lovely meal and written the blog, which if you don't know about, drop in the comments and I'll tell you. But anyway, so what I'm going to be doing now is the thing that I talked about, which is I'm going to paint this with some burnt umber, I think it is. I can't remember. Yeah, raw umber, just to give it that coloration. And then once that's dry, which won't take long, it's very warm tonight, then what I'll be able to do is put some flock on it, and then I can start to actually work on the tent. I think this is the right thing to have done, rather than try and do the tent and then do the terrain or the scenicking around it. I just don't think it would have worked very well. I think this is going to be a far more effective method. So if I can stay in shot, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Already started to warp, but I'll be able to weight that down. That'll be fine. So I'll let that dry, and I'll be back a bit later on to do the scenicking. After some thought, I've decided that I am going to put more of the dark grey, as I call it, onto this piece. I just think that I want it to be a little brighter than this. It's a little dark, it's a little gloomy, that's not really what I'm looking for. So I'm going to paint it on a little bit thicker. I'm not going to film because it's just going to be me painting, and I'll bring it back at the end to show you what it looks like. Once that's done and dried, then I can do a dry brush of lighter grey and white, and I think that's what I want to do, and then drop in my my dry brushes of odd colours before I go on to the what flocking I'm going to do. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna crack on with now. I will definitely bring you back at the end to show you what it looks like. So I painted this here before, as you see, and it's now fully dried. It hasn't actually warped that much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply the cloth, which is actually canvas, to make the actual tent. So let me talk you through this process that I'm going to do. First of all, I've got myself some PVA, as you just saw. I've squirted it onto my little plate, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that bead of PVA just down the edge of the cloth. I've decided against putting any flock inside the tent. I figure that well, that's just not what I want. So the next thing I'm going to do is, if you've followed this channel, you'll know that I am a big fan of clamps. So what I'm going to do is we will make sure we get this right. Yep, we will drop this over onto the edge, onto that PVA, and then very, very much on the very edge we will clamp it like so, so it doesn't move. Oh, that clamp was a bit wonky. That clamp's a bit dodge. There we are, so that's clamped. So the next thing we're going to do is exactly the same thing but on the other side. So we're going to run our bead of PVA down this near side now, like so, and then stretch and clamp it again. When that's dry, I will come along and I'll trim off the excess which is at this edge. So we'll get another couple of clamps. Pop this on its edge, might make it a bit easier for me to manage. There we are. And we'll get in with one clamp here. There we are. And we'll get in with the other clamp over here. Bit fiddly, but it's okay. And I think that looks a whole lot better than I expected it to look. Let me just pull that clamp a little bit further out. There we are. Of course, what I should have done is run a bead of PVA along the top. I forgot. Ha! So, pull that back. The thing that I missed then is a bead of PVA along the top of the ridge pole. Like so. There we are. Oops. And we'll just put a little bit more PVA down here. It has transferred onto the cloth, but that's fine. So now we can stretch this over as I just did, clamp it in place, and then leave that to dry for probably a little while. I'm just doing this in 2 minutes I've got before I go for my lunch, just to get it done and drying. So yeah, that should now work quite well. It's actually a bit of a pain having it a bit long because it's interfering with my clamp. There we are. Okay, so that's done. So we'll let that dry and I'll bring you back in when it has so you can see what it looks like. That has dried fine, as you can see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim this excess off here with my sharp scissors, hopefully not disturbing the glue. And then once that's trimmed, like so, I'm going to come in with some more PVA, which I'm going to put onto my plate rather than direct. I'm learning, you see. I'm going to paint that across the top of these folds, and the purpose of this is I'm going to put some stones down, so it will look like the this is obviously a very basic tent, and it literally is what it looks like. It's a frame with some canvas stretched over the top that then has stones holding down the edges. So we'll just paint some PVA on, and then let's bring my stone bucket in, zoom out slightly. There we are. So I've got my stone bucket, and what I'm going to do, quite simply, if I can do this on camera without getting in the way, is hold that and drop stones along the edge. There we are. And that is how I'm going to make my tent. Now, like I've said a few times, if you use the card like they say, so the kind of crunchy paper towel as they call it, then potentially you will be able to do this a slightly different way than I have. However, because I'm using actual cloth, I've had to be a little bit more creative in how I'm sticking it down, and I think that looks really nice. I'm quite pleased with that. It's going to look very nice when it's dried. I may make one or two more, but for now I think that is the official part of the build done. So now all I need to do is finish off the other bit, which is sat over there looking very grey, and I will hopefully get done in the next couple of days. As you can see, I completed that paint, not really a dry brush at all, that heavy overbrush. I'm much happier with that tone now. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go to this lighter grey, and I'm going to do a more traditional dry brush, just not everywhere but over the rougher parts and on the cliffs. And I've got a large brush to do that, and I've got my bit of paper just down here, so I'll get that done. This is just a lighter grey, it's not a white. I will come in after this is dried and do the white. I need to get this finished. Right now is Thursday, just taking a brief break from work to get this done because it'll only take a minute, and I need to have this published on Tuesday next week. So yeah, it's not massively tight to get done. However, I do have a resin pour to do in that time, and so time is not massively on my side, but we shall see. So I'll just get this dry brushed. I've almost finished, as you can see, it's very quick. There we are, that's done, happy with that. It's just brought out those highlights. I might come along and do it with the white again, but now I better get back to work. With the grey dry brush, the light grey dry brush done, it's now time to do a very, very light white. So I've brought my white paint, and I'm going to do that just in select places, and that will bring out this texture really, really nicely. And it'll be much quicker even than it was on the grey, because I'm only going to do it very lightly, and then I can move on to the next step, which is the one I'm looking forward to as always, which is the scenicking. So got to put some mud, got to prepare for the resin pour. There we are. So a very, very light white, and that has just brought the edges out nicely to contrast against all the rest of the colours. I may or may not come in with some odd colours on the cliffs. At the moment I quite like it, but we shall see. So that's that done. Next up, we'll be back with some grout. I've just mixed up some brown grout using the technique that I used before, so I didn't bother to film that, just mix it up with PVA and a little bit of the dirt from my backyard, and you can see it here. I did actually make it a little bit too, doesn't look tasty, I did actually make it a little bit too thick, thin sorry, at first, so I added a little bit more grout, which is a risk. But what we're going to be doing here is, if you recall, there is, in the description, there is an area which is a bit muddy, where there'll be some footprints. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some mud and some dirt coloration just in this area here, around where the edge of the stream is going to be, and then when that's dried I'll put some gloss varnish on it, and then that will look a bit muddy and a bit yucky. So that's that. I'm also going to put this in other places on the diorama, in which I will then probably put some grasses and some and what have you on it. I've mixed up far too much because, as I say, I made the just slipped to put way too much water in. So what I'm going to do now, I won't film it because I haven't totally decided where I want to do it. So I need to like rotate the diorama and do all sorts of faffing about. But I'll bring you back when it's done to show you where the dirt is going to be, where the rock is not going to be, and yeah, it should look quite nice, I think. Hopefully it won't be too stark. Like I say, with some flock and then some static grass on it, I think it will look quite nice. So I'll get that done and I'll bring you back when it is finished. There we are. That looks very, very sharp at the moment and harsh, however it won't continue to look like that. When that's dried, I will come over and I'll dry brush it with a creamy colour, so a very light colour, and it will then really, really settle back into the rest of the terrain. And also what I might do is actually come in and dry brush over towards the edges with more of the light grey, so just to bed it down. But obviously we'll also have some grass on there. The idea is that this is where there's some soil gathered, thin soil, so I do want to definitely tone down that colour. It's way too brown at the moment, but I think it will work well, so we shall see. I'll let that dry for a couple of hours and then come in to do the next step. I've just done something that I don't normally do. I have done a test piece, and I think I'm happy with how this is going to work, because I'm feeling my way a little bit with this next step. What I need to do is bring this brown down so it's not quite such a shock against the grey. And so what I'm doing is I'm coming in first of all with the dry brush of the darker grey that I use. So not the light grey, but the darker grey. And when that dries, and you can see how it is making a difference, hopefully you can see that, it certainly is in real life, and as it dries it will make more of a difference. It will just blend the two together, and then as I come in with my flocks and what have you, then the shock will be even less, because I can put some static grass and what have you. I am a little bit under pressure for time, but I do want to do the best job, which is why I'm coming in now, and as you can see, doing quite a, that was a bit of a heavy overbrush, but okay, that's fine. Doing quite a heavy overbrush over the top. The other thing that I have decided while I've been kind of thinking and doing other things in my life is that I'm probably not going to do resin on this. I'm probably going to go for the clear silicone sealant again. The main reason for that is it's such a small quantity, and mixing that amount to just do that, it's actually really hard. It's easier to mix a large amount of resin than a small amount of resin. So I'm gonna just go for the for that. It's also going to be a bit quicker, but it isn't quite as good a result, but it still looks good. I think I quite like the result I get, and so yeah, it's not terrible. It's just not quite as good as resin. But you can trust me when I say that the next video in this series will have enough resin to make up for that. I am very excited already about the next Battle Games in Middle-earth video, and I'm also very pleased that I'm slowing it down so that it's not actually being done once a month, because there's not a chance I would be able to achieve, or it is being done once a month. Anyway, I'm muttering as I always do, and as I tell myself not to, but again, that's who I am. So yeah, I'll stop talking now, get this done, let it dry a bit, and then bring it back in to let you know what the next step will be, which will either be more dry brushing, or it may even be the next step of the flocking and the next step of the scenicking, which I'm particularly excited about. So yeah, that's definitely working. That's definitely a good idea. So yeah, let's get this finished, and I will bring you back in a short while. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a rolled up tent. So rather than having a tent built like on the main one, this is going to be rolled up, because we see in the there's a description in the text that says that they were coming back. So what I've got is I've got a roll of the same cloth that I used to make the tents for the main build. Apologies, I pulled that out of shot a bit then. And I have 3 cocktail sticks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just snip the ends off these cocktail sticks, just like that, just so they're not quite so obviously cocktail sticks. Now, for a tent, what you generally have is you have one cross piece, and then normally you either have it as like a square shape, or you have a A-frame. Now, the tent that I built for the other is just the simplest one, where you've got a pole, a cross ridge, and a pole. So we're going to go with that one. So what we're going to do is we actually probably only need 2 for this. Apologies, just had a fly land on me. It's warm and I've shut the windows, and there's a couple of flies got in. So we're just going to cut that down, and also hopefully, there we are, cut that one. So what we have is we have a whole cocktail stick with the edges cut off, and we have the 2 A-frames, so you can see how that would work if we were to assemble it. And I might eventually do a tent like that. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to roll up the these inside the bed, the roll, like so. And I'm going to put a double super glue just so that these have something to stick to. So a little bit of super glue if this works. It does. That was too much super glue. super glue either does too much or too little. Have you noticed that? So we're now going to very carefully roll that up. Try not to get it to stick to our fingers, but that'll be very hard as it's gone through. And then last but not least, we'll put another dab of super glue just here. And we'll roll that over. And what I will do is I will now clamp that, not on the super glue, because obviously then the super glue would then stick to the clamps. So we'll get a clamp here, and we'll put another one on the other end. And that will now dry. And when that dries, that can be a nice tent that is going to sit, which can then be set on the diorama and will show where the campsite would have been. So there we are. Now it's time to apply the flock. So I've had a bit of a think, and what I've come up with is I'm going to use this stuff here, the Stru-Material Mossgrün, which I've had since Belgium. It's the darkest, and it's actually shot bought, which I don't often use, but it is going to be right. It's got a nice little variation. It's going to be put in place in not too great quantity, and then I'm going to put the 2mm dead static grass from Luke's APS on over the top of that, and maybe I'll do also some autumn and a few other bits and pieces around there. The second thing that I'm going to be applying, actually before I forgot, before I do the static grass, is some very dry tea leaves, because this is a dry area. It is not full of lush grass. So yeah, what I'm going to do is use my terrain glue, which is something which I will have a link in the description below, and I may even remember to put a card at the end of my video. I'm going to start to try to be a little bit more, kind of use the tools that YouTube gives me, which will show you how to make it. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply that, and we're going to apply it relatively patchy, because I don't want this to be too solid, but there's going to be a little bit more of it in the dell. Though of course I need to remember where the fire is going to go, so don't forget that. And then there'll be some on this ridge here. So basically wherever I've got brown paint is where there could be some dead dry grass and some grass that's still kind of just hanging on to the edges of being green. So I'll get this done. I will leave the camera running and pop some music on for you, and I will speak to you again at the end of this process. Okay, there we are, that's enough. So about 7 minutes of clip in total, and that's done all of the flocking that I want to do. So I'm going to leave that to dry, and I should be able to leave that overnight probably. I should be able to get onto doing the static grass tomorrow. I am considering using some tufts, so maybe I'll be back before then. But for now, I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to have another think and move on to another part of the build. This next thing may not work at all. What I've got is a spoon with some actual ash out of my fire in it. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to attempt to stick that in place for where the fire is, and I'll also put some sticks and what have you, some burnt sticks that I'll pull out the fire as well. So it's going to be real fire stuff. I've no idea if this is going to work. It may just look like a pile of dust. I don't know, but whatever. So we're going to put a blob of the PVA there where I want to put it, and then what we'll do is we'll drop the ash on top. And I'm not sure how this is going to work. As I say, it may be terrible, but it may look good. And you just got to try these things, haven't you? So there we are. I'll let that to dry, and yeah, cool. Hopefully it's going to work. Now it's time to do my static grass. So as I said before, sorry for reaching across, I have the dead grass from Luke's APS, which is what I'm going to put on. So I'll pop some music on and I'll just apply that everywhere. You've seen how I do it. I use the WWS Fast Tack glue. I have another pot of it up there for when that one runs out, because that's very close. And I actually use the WWS Pro grass applicator, but it's a very early model, batch number 1, the first ever batch they made, and is serial number 13. So I'll get that going. I'll put some music on, and hopefully this won't take me very long because it's quite late now, but I want to get it done. There we are. I did the static grassing as you saw, and then this morning what I've done is I've hoovered it off, and that is now really starting to take shape. I'm very pleased. So the next step before I get on to doing the water effects is going to be applying these BGiME tufts. I have some 6mm dead and some 6mm autumn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place these around the board. I'm actually decided I'm going to try using the fast drying basing glue, also from BGiME. So thank you, Luke, for your awesome products. And yeah, I'm just going to scatter them around. So I'm not going to run the camera because I'm going to be moving around and getting in the way, and yeah, it's just sticking tufts down, but I will bring you back when it's done to show you what it looks like. I've done that. As you can see, we've got some tufts scattered around. Then up here about by where the stream is going to be, apologies for that noise, someone's decided to start doing some planing outside, but up near where the stream is going to be, you can see I've got some greener tufts. So the next thing to do is the little roll I made up here, which is the tent. I'm going to glue that in place. I've decided to stick it in place, and I'm just going to tuck it in back here. So that's where that's going to go. So we're going to get a bead of PVA, run that along there carefully, not too much, but enough to glue it securely. And then that will then just get put in place and left to dry. So that's another bit of the detailing going in, and we're getting close to completed now. There we are. That's the that's a tent roll. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to do the water effect. So I'll get myself ready and I'll bring you back for that when I'm about to start. So to the nearly final process. A little bit more dressing up to do around the campsite, but yeah, this needs to be done so we can go off. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the clear silicone sealant for a bathroom, and I'm going to be doing the water effects here. So to do that, what we do is, it's quite simple actually. It's a very quick and simple process, though today I'm going to be doing something a little different, I think. Trying a bit of a different technique, which has never gone wrong on this channel, has it? But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to run our bead of PVA of silicone in the channel where we want the water, and it's just coming out from in there. I may eventually might actually paint something to show where it's coming from. And if you're using one of these little kind of like pressy things, you need to remember to disconnect or release the pressure and put your lid on, so otherwise it will go off and then you'll be sad. So the next thing we're going to do is I have my 99% alcohol, which is what you can use to make sure that it doesn't stick. And then I'm going to get the back of a metal spoon, and this is the new thing, because previously I've done this with my fingers, but then you end up with some fingerprints and you're not quite as able to work in maybe some nice rushing water kind of shapes. And I had the idea that potentially the back of a metal spoon combined with the alcohol would allow me to just push this around a little bit more successfully, make it flat where I want it to be flat, and also not get my hands covered in the stinky alcohol. And I'm doing this just before I start work, so I really don't want to sit with stinky alcohol hands all day. And that, so far, seems to be working. I'm able to push it in nicely. I'm able to do the rushing and the flat bit at the top here. It is a rushing stream, so we don't want it to be too smooth, but we also don't want it to be covered in fingerprints. And when this is done, I'm going to leave it all day to go off, because it does stay sticky, particularly the effect, I think, of the alcohol means it stays quite sticky. So there we are. So that's just taken a couple of minutes. I now have to go to work, but I am very happy with how that looks. Let me zoom that in on you. There we are. That looks really nice. I think that's a really, really cool effect. I will just drop the camera slightly and zoom right in. That has worked absolutely perfectly. Wow, that's better than I expected it to be. Right, I will bring you back when I come to do the mud, which will go here, and then when I finish off the campsite. But that will not be until at least tonight, if not tomorrow morning. It's time to finish off the fire. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to use some of my terrain glue, which I didn't have out, and I'm going to paint that over the top of what you see there now. So basically what I've done is I've taken some twigs and I have, let me start that again. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish off the fire. So what I've got there is I've got some twigs just out of the fire, as I always do, and I have broken them, split them up, and put them on in a relatively random way, as you can see. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to paint over the top with my terrain glue, which I have here, and that will both seal those in place and also just finally seal the actual ash that's underneath, because it's not actually all that well sealed at the moment. So let's get that done. It's going to be a brutal but hopefully effective technique. So just put a load of glue on, like so. There we are. Kind of ruined the arrangement, but that's fine, I can do it again. There. Nice bit of terrain glue. And then what we'll do is we will put our twigs in. The idea being that when that's dried, in not a very long time I don't think, because it's very warm again. Good thing with hobbying in the summer here is when you're making terrain, it's very I'm not sure when that cut off, but it did cut off, and I'm not entirely sure why. So anyway, let me talk you through what I'm doing here. So what I've got is I'm putting in place the fire. So I don't know what I lost, so just in case I'll just act as if I lost everything, and I'll just put this clip and remove the last one because it disappeared for some reason. So yeah, so what I've done is I've put some terrain paint over terrain glue over the top of the fire and the ash, and then I've got some twigs that I've cut, just split up, just broken by hand, and these are going to, now you can see they're satin glue because I've done that just with the terrain glue. When that's dried, the idea will be that I will then put some black on the edges of the twigs to make it look like they are actually burned. So I have one more process to do now, which I will just set up the shot and find out why the previous one stopped. I'll be back in just 1 second. So I worked out what had happened. The little kind of monitor that I have that means that I can have the camera behind me and to my left, because I'm here, actually ran out of battery, and for some reason that then caused the recording to stop. So right now I'm shooting a little bit blind, so I do apologise if I get in the way or I'm not very clear on shot, but anyway, I will make sure to keep that battery charged and also look out for a proper 12 volt power supply. But anyway, that's that. So what I'm going to do now is the little stack of wood that is discussed as being here. Now I need to think about my lines. This is where the entrance to the dell is, just through this little gap here, which is a little bit close to the fire, but I figured that maybe they're lighting that to keep the animals away that might come up. I think here is a good place to put the wood. So what I'm going to do is I have some PVA, and this is just going to be something I'm going to run through the evening. So I'll show you the first bit, including way too much dollop going on there, which I'll clean up. I'll show you the first bit, and I'll just keep layering this and layering this through the evening. So we have some twigs. Again, all I've done is just broken them up by hand, and I will start to stack them like so. So then we'll grab that over dollop, waste not, want not, and get some more, and we'll just start stacking up twigs like this. So that is going to be our stack of firewood, which has been left, we know, in the book by rangers looking for them. In the films it's not quite so cool. So I'm going to get that done. That was just at the edge of the shot, but I think you could see it. I'm just going to get that done now, and I'll bring you back when it's finished, and we'll be nearly wrapping up. There's actually one more thing I'm going to do, but I can't do that until the fire's dried, so I will do that tomorrow. Now it's time to turn this area muddy. So what I've got here, and how I'm going to do this, is I have this boat varnish. This is yacht varnish. Yachten lack. That's what that says, yachten lack, yacht varnish. And so what I'll do is I will just take an old brush that I don't mind getting knackered, and I will paint that on where I want the mud to be. And it will then dry a little clear, sorry, a little shiny even, not clear, a little shiny, and it will look a bit like mud. And it doesn't need to take that much, I just want to have a little bit, just there. And when that's dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with some miniatures, some miniatures that are not, just bits of miniatures, and I'm going to step their feet into some black paint, and I'm probably going to just put some little footsteps around in that area as well. So that is that mud. Final few touches on this advanced build now. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm coming in with some black paint as a very light wash, and I'm just going to drop that on the edges of these bits of wood and allow some to fall onto the centre so that it's basically like soot, just like that. So there we are, one old fireplace. And now we will jump up and do the final steps. Literally, you'll see the pun when you see it. And now for the final step. I have a knackered old brush, as you can see, if I can get that in focus. There we are, not focused, but whatever. And I have some black paint again, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting some blurred footprints around in this area, which is very specifically described in the book. So we don't need too much paint, and then what we're going to do is just going to come in and just dab it like so. So it looks almost like shadows, and it'll be good enough for the purposes of this. I didn't have any miniature. I was going to do this with the footprints of actual foot miniature, but I didn't have any in that had any feet around, so I couldn't do it. But there we are. So when that dries, that will darken down, that will lighten up. Sorry, I might even come in and just dry brush over the top again. But yeah, so that now looks like some muddy footprints, but people can't really tell what they are because Pepin and Mary went and trod all over them, and then Aragorn was not able to do his trackery thing. So that is the final step. We will now go to wrap up, and I'll take some pictures. I'm very pleased with how this has turned out, and I'll see you in a second. Well, there we are. What an epic video. I've nearly finished editing when I filmed this, and so it was very interesting for me to see that without really thinking about it, I have actually laid out the campsite in how I did my original sketch, and I can promise you I didn't refer back to it, which shows you how well I plan things. I very much wing it, but it's turned out the same, with the fire in the same place and the little camping area in the same place, and funnily enough, the pile of sticks in the same place, because I changed my mind several times on that, but they ended up being where I originally planned. I wonder how often that happens. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that they showed off some good techniques. I'm particularly pleased with how the little rushing stream came out. I'm trying to try different things for water. I've got some other ideas that will be coming up in other videos, and I just want to find the one that's going to be the quickest, easiest and give the best results. And so far, that one, just changing up my technique a little bit to use the back of a metal spoon, that's really worked and it looks brilliant and I'm very pleased. The normal tutorial based build is looking really good as well. I'm very impressed again, as I always am, and I'm sure that this is actually going to get some play because there's a battle company scenario which I want to play, and it does involve a campfire. So there we are. Now I've got some really good terrain for that. So I know this is a very long video. If you've made it this far, congratulations and thank you. Please pop comments below if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feedback, anything at all. I love to hear from you, and I always do respond. So yeah, do pop those comments in the below this video, and yeah, tell other people as well. Let people know about this channel if you're interested. If you're enjoying it, then please do spread the word. I will sign off as always by saying thank you very much for watching this video. My next Battle Games in Middle Earth will be out in a month, and please stay healthy, stay safe and stay well.